We'll now take leaders' questions under Standing Order 36 and I call Deputy Mary-LouMcDonald, please.
Count Corla. Taoiseach, we're now 4 weeks out from the most important local and European elections for a generation, and housing is the #1 talking point on the doors. It's the biggest issue by far for workers and families across the state. After 13 years of Fine Gael government, the housing crisis has gone from bad to worse. Rip-off rents continue to rise, homelessness has hit record levels, an entire generation is locked out of home ownership due to the sky-high house prices. And on the watch of Fine Gael governments, housing affordability has been torn to shreds. A new report, Taoiseach, published by myhome.ie shows that nearly half of people are postponing buying a new home due to the cost of living. Your government's failure to deliver the affordable homes needed to rent and buy is at the heart of the problem. You've missed your affordable housing targets in each of the years since your so-called housing plan started. And in the last 2 years, not one affordable home to rent or buy was delivered by government in Dublin City. The same story for Galway, Kerry, Wexford, Donegal, Longford, Louth, Mayo, Sligo, Tipperary, and I could go on. See, your government is very big on promises, but very, very short on delivery. And to make matters worse, the homes delivered through what the government considers affordable housing schemes have price tags far beyond what ordinary workers can afford. I'll give you one example. A scheme in Clonburris in Clondalkin in Dublin, €425,000. That's close to €500,000. It seems that's what you consider to be affordable. I think that's off the wall. Little wonder that you refused to say what you regarded as an affordable home, because if we're to go by these schemes, your answer is sky high. And it's no better, Taoiseach, when it comes to your scheme for affordable homes to rent. Let me give you another example. City West. Rents of close to €1,800 a month. Now, I don't know in what world that is deemed to be affordable rent. That's what renters are getting nonetheless from a government scheme. So they're ripped off by landlords, ripped off by government. The whole thing beggars belief. Taoiseach, your government's repeated failures and broken promises on affordable housing have real consequences for real families. Young people are stuck at home with their parents, unable to strike out on their own. Today, just over a quarter of 25 to 34-year-olds own their own home. That's down from 60% in 2004. 40% of people under the age of 34 still live in their family home, and I think that statistic alone should be enough for this government to pack their bags. You claim to be the party of home ownership, but the truth is that it has never been harder for people to buy their own home, and that is a direct result of government policy. Is see, an tíocht an ceist is mós na tábhachán á tiúla agus orpacha. Tá glún gan fála cuair tithe freisréasúnta mar gur hep an rialtas iad a chur fáil. Tá sé in ann don ahrú. In your speech to your party's Ordesh, you said that you would fix housing once and for all. Well, all three Taoiseach who have led this coalition government have made the same promise, and each time things got worse. So my simple question, Taoiseach, is this. Why is your government repeatedly breaking its promises and failing on affordable housing?
Thank you, Deputy McDonald. Taoiseach, please.
Well, thanks so much to Deputy McDonald for raising what I agree is a really, really important issue in relation to housing. And I know when I go right across the country and when I engage with young people and I engage with their parents, I know that for many people, home ownership can still feel out of the reach of many. And we are working day and night to change that. We're working every single day to make progress. And I'm very happy to report progress, because we're now building homes at levels not seen since 2008. Every single week in this country now, 500 individuals or couples are buying their first home. And you, Deputy, as you travel around the country, as I see you do, you must see those homes. You must meet those young people who have their first home, homes that didn't exist only months or years ago, that are now in place with family lives starting under them. We now have work on over 12,000 homes have started in the first quarter of this year alone. That figure is up 60% on the previous year. Over 12,000 homes started in the first couple of months of 2024. And we know many people who are renting want to buy as well. So we're trying to put supports in place to help them with the cost of their rent. And that's why we put in place a renter's tax credit. It made a difference. It's why we've kept it. It's why we've increased it. It's why the three parties in government want to do even more to try and put a bit of money back in the pocket of a renter so that it can help them meet the rent and help them save for the deposit as well. We've also put in place a number of schemes, Deputy, that I hope you'll tell people that you're against. The Help to Buy scheme, the First Home scheme, the Vacancy Property refurbishment grant, all practical ways to help people. Each and every single one of them you have, in fairness to you, very honestly committed to getting rid of. So I wonder what you say to the tens of thousands of people, more in fact, who've benefited from those schemes. I wonder what you say to their parents who, when they watch their child leave the box room and buy a home because of the help of those schemes, and why you say that if you were Taoiseach next year, none of those schemes would be in place. We're already doing affordable homes, and there are affordable homes being offered right around this country for as low as 225,000 in Waterford, 255,000 in Kilkenny, 300,000 in Dublin when we apply the affordable purchase discount. Later this week, the Minister for Housing will make a further announcement in Dublin Fingal in relation to more affordable homes as well. Last year saw over 4,000 affordable homes delivered, up from 1,750 the previous year. We're on track for around 6,000 this year. So I know you believe for you to succeed politically, you need the country's housing policy to fail. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Every single metric now, in terms of supply, in terms of schemes, in terms of targets, in terms of capacity, is making progress. But we know we have much more to do. Now, you asked me why I wouldn't give one specific figure as to what an affordable home was, and I gave a very honest answer in relation to that. It depends on the type of home. It depends on your own personal circumstances. It depends on what part of the country. I'd ask you, 139 days after you told the people of this country that you'd provide homes for €300,000 in Dublin, how you intend to do that. Because your private member's motion that will be debated in this House isn't that. Your private member's motion in this House talks about leasehold affordable schemes, where people won't actually ever own their own home. But again, maybe that's giving you an insight into the ideology of Sinn Féin when it comes to housing policy. And also, it doesn't talk about Dublin. It says it depends on where in the country the house will be. So will you admit 139 days later that you made a mistake, that you misspoke and then doubled down in relation to promising young people something that you've absolutely no intention of delivering? And when, finally, will you publish your all-encompassing housing plan to rival the Housing for All plan?
So thank you. I mentioned a number of counties: Louth, Mayo, Sligo, Tipperary. I could have added Cavan, Leitrim, Offaly, Roscommon, Sligo. I mentioned Sligo. And these are the official figures, an official record of your abysmal failure, the failure of the state to deliver affordable homes to purchase and to rent. So by the targets that you set yourself, you have failed. It's a big fail. And I have never seen housing needs so desperate. And I happen to represent communities for whom a housing crisis is not actually a new crisis. Overcrowding, very poor living conditions have been experienced generation after generation as it happens. But I have never seen anything as desperate as this. And what makes matters worse, it seems, is that we have a government that is utterly delusional. Either that or just deeply dishonest, because you are not delivering at pace and at scale the affordable homes that young people in particular and families more generally need to purchase and to buy. So I want to ask you again, Taoiseach, what changes now? You said you're sorting this out. What change do you make now to begin the process of sorting this out?
Thank you.
So it seems we're going to have to wait for day 140 to find out how the leader of Sinn Féin intends to deliver on her commitment given in the Irish Times that she will provide people in this capital city and county with homes of 300,000. Because your motion doesn't do it tonight. Your motion doesn't do it tonight. And promising people leasehold, People don't want a leasehold. People want to be able to go out and buy their own homes. The people that you must be meeting across the country, that's what they tell me as well. The people in the box rooms, I'll tell you what we're delivering now, but you have a leader. She did well there for you. Just let me respond. Thank you. We've already delivered 4,000 affordable homes. We've 21 local authorities so far. We're on track for over 6,000 this year. I've shown you, and more importantly, shown the people at home who don't want to see you playing politics with a crisis, how we're continuing to make progress. You ask how we're going to fix it. I'll tell you how we're going to do it. We're going to deliver record supply this year. Already this year, we've seen more than 12,000 homes commence. Most people in this country welcome it. It seems to upset you. It seems to upset you because, and you've probably objected to a fair few, but there's 12,000 homes this year that have already been commenced. That is a good thing. It's a 60% increase on the previous year. Surely you'd welcome that. That, coupled with schemes that help people buy their own home, which you oppose, keeping them in place, increasing our housing targets as we go through the year, delivering more supply, increasing our affordable home delivery. That's how you make a real difference, not just coming in here, identifying the problem and offering no real solutions beyond rhetoric.
Deputy Ivana Bacik, please.
Taoiseach, I welcome the long-awaited publication yesterday of the 3 external reports examining governance, human resources and finances at RTE. But as we review the content of those reports, I think people around the country are amazed and alarmed that our national broadcaster, the organisation to whom they pay the licence fee every year, continues to be mired in controversy. Because in more than 400 pages, the reports cover barter accounts, broken relationships, feckless governance, and a culture which saw perks for some and dodgy contracts for the rest. And indeed, there's some startling content in there. RTE claimed to have lost records of the now infamous barter account, described as hiding in plain sight, and elsewhere accounting transactions were described as fictitious. Well, it's welcome that both the Government and RTE have accepted all 116 recommendations in principle, particularly those relating to the scandalous treatment of staff at RTE. And I'm talking in particular about the practice of bogus self-employment contracts, contracts which we know deprive hard-working staff of so much, of access to mortgage approval, maternity pay, pension entitlements. Taoiseach, I've heard from people who cannot retire or take sick leave or holidays, all because RTE will not recognise that they are employees. And some of these have worked in the organisation for decades. My colleague Senator Marie Sherlock has spoken before about the upstairs-downstairs culture pertaining in RTE, where workers on bogus self-employment contracts were paying for the flahula spending of those at the top. But Taoiseach, we must do more than cut, because curbing excess without delivering on decency and decent standards will do as much harm as good. Already we know that the Department of Social Protection's scope investigation does not cover all the workers who are being exploited at RTE, and it's scandalous that any employee of a state agency should be miscategorised in this way. Yet at RTE we know it was widespread, and that's not good enough, because good journalism matters. A lesser mentioned story in the press today is about a study carried out by Dr. Eileen Cullity, who warns that parts of Ireland risk becoming news deserts, or areas which lack a reliable news service. And everyone across the country should have access to accurate and up-to-date news and information. At this time of so much fake news, it's all the more important that we are able to trust those who report the news, and that's especially important of our national broadcaster, RTE. Yet the reputation of so many hard-working journalists has been hurt over reckless governance at RTE. So, Taoiseach, in your limited time left in government, you and Minister Martin and the Cabinet have important decisions to make. We understand RTE has been given 6 weeks to outline how recommendations will be implemented, but Taoiseach, it also falls to you, the government of this country, to make a decision, to present a plan as to how to resource our national broadcaster sustainably. We know you've been able to commission the reports. I've welcomed the publication of those reports, but it's time to make decisions. So, Taoiseach, when will we have an announcement on the sustainable funding model for RTE? And as part of that announcement, will there be a dedicated fund to end the practice of bogus self-employment contracts for all at RTE?
Thank you, Deputy Bacik. Taoiseach.
I want to thank Deputy Bacik for raising this matter, and I was very pleased that yesterday Minister Catherine Martin brought to Government the 3 reviews that you've referenced into RTE. The reviews prepared by the Independent Expert Advisory Committees, the review of governance and culture, and the review of contractor fees, HR and other matters in RTE. And Minister Martin also brought the Mazar's final report on the RTE barter account. I do genuinely believe that these reports path the way forward, show us a way forward, show us the opportunity to get to where you aspire to, and I think where all parties aspire to, and I think where the people of this country aspire to, a better supported, better resourced, better run and better functioning RT, and a real value on public service broadcasting. And I hope yesterday marked an opportunity to begin to turn the page in terms of not just looking back in terms of what was a very dire situation around governance and other matters, but actually beginning to look forward in terms of implementing the recommendations. Because we've been saying for a while now, these two independent reports were the first reports that actually produced recommendations. Every other report, while valuable or useful, told us what went wrong. We now have 116 recommendations across the reports, 101 of which are for RT, 15 of which are for government. Government at its meeting yesterday accepted the 15 that are for us. RT, I welcome, as you do, that they have accepted the recommendations. They now need to come back to government within 6 weeks with a very robust response and implementation plan. And Minister Martin appraised government yesterday of how she and her department intends to oversee and monitor the implementation of that plan. In relation to the issue around bogus self-employment, there were two important recommendations read the scope, and one was to intensify the engagement between the Department of Social Protection and RTE, and secondly was for the Department and RTE to positively consider a mediation process to try and help fast-track the process for the very reasons you highlight in terms of the real impact that this has had on workers, often lower paid workers in RTE at a time of largesse for some. That sense of lower paid workers, or just quite frankly normal workers going about their businesses, missing out and being mistreated as well. Just in relation to the issue of funding, this is the government that will settle the question in terms of how to sustainably fund RT and public service broadcasting. We reaffirmed that at Cabinet yesterday. The three leaders in the coalition, the leaders of the three parties, of which I'm one, are committed to that, and it is our intention to make a decision in relation to funding by the summer break. I think it's important that we do that. There's probably two options on the table. Different parties in this House have their views. I welcome that. It's good to have those debates. But ultimately, there is a rubber hits the road moment here in terms of RT responding with the full implementation plan, and that being an enabler to government for once and for all, being able to make a decision on sustainable funding. I do want to acknowledge the Trojan work done by Minister Catherine Martin in very difficult circumstances over a sustained period of time that has helped bring us to this point today. And she will be, and this will be, the government and the Minister who will resolve the funding issue.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Bacik.
Well, I thank you for the response and for reaffirming your commitment to settle this issue in the lifetime of this government, and indeed for providing me with that time frame of giving the plan for making the decision for the Sustainable Future funding model by the summer recess. That's very welcome. But I am mindful of the concerns expressed by Seamus Dooley of the National Union of Journalists when he responded to the publication of the reports by pointing out the real risks of delay, particularly if there is a legislative change in the funding structure. He also points out that the shadow of bogus self-employment has long lingered over RTE, and indeed that it's not confined to RTE. So while I do very much welcome your provision of a time frame for the decision on the sustainable funding model, and while I also welcome your reference to those key recommendations on ending the practice of bogus self-employment, I would also ask Taoiseach, what about other organisations? Are there other organisations around the country where this state-run organisations where this practice is an issue, and is there a plan in government to tackle this? And I do very much welcome that proposal, as I say, that you'll be making the decision on future funding models by the summer recess. But you might explain precisely how that is to be done, given the limited time left to us, and given the fact that we are also seeing local and European elections within that time frame.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
So thanks very much to Deputy Bacik for that. Look, we will obviously have to work with parties in this House in terms of any legislative proposals that we bring forward. My commitment, though, is that we make the policy decision at Cabinet in terms of the future funding by the summer recess. That will obviously require, and I think Minister Martin has been very clear on this, when you look through the 15 recommendations that pertain to government, there is going to be a clear need for legislative change. So wherever we land on a funding model, somewhat regardless of that, there is going to need to be a piece, or certainly in addition to that, there is going to need to be a piece of legislation brought forward. My understanding is our initial thinking is one piece of legislation to address a range of changes that are likely to be needed to the Broadcasting Act, the Controller and Auditor General being one change that I'm eager to see government progress. So decision by the summer recess, whatever legislation will flow, the publication of a general scheme, the opportunity for scrutiny, and a willingness on the part of this government to work with the opposition in terms of how we best advance that legislation.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Our next contributor is Deputy Michael McNamara, but Neil Shenshall. So we'll proceed to Deputy Danny Healy-Rae on behalf of the Rural Independent Group.
Thank you very much, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach is very clear that to many that he've lost control of the migration issue. And yet, at the same time, many of our own young men and women, boys and girls, are leaving this country to go to Australia, Dubai, Canada and other places because they can't afford. The one thing they can't do is to afford to build a house for themselves or to buy a house, or even in Kerry to get planning permission to build a house. Many of our young farmers are deciding not to take over viable, productive farms, where a lot of money and sweat and blood has been put into to ensure the continuation. But these people are deciding, these youngsters are deciding, and not prepared to take on the constant vilification, demonisation, and regulations being doled out by your government of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, and demanded and driven by the Greens and indeed others. Our tourism industry in Killarney and Kerry is suffering because of the influx of migrants which are placed in so many of our hotels and guest houses. 36% of our bed nights availability is taken up by asylum seekers and refugees. Already many small restaurants, cafes, pubs and souvenir shops are closed. I'm canvassing since 1973 and I never met so many people concerned and raising the issue with me about the migration issue on the doors at this time. You've lost control. They feel that you've lost complete control of the migration issue. Nobody objects to asylum seekers or refugees if they have a genuine case of distress. But who can explain how they salvaged their cats and dogs if the bombs were raining around them, dropping around them, and that our taxpayers are paying so much to quarantine these cats and dogs, or who will explain how they got time to bring their flashy SUVs and high-powered cars registered in Ukraine? How did they get time to do that? And how have they're going home for holidays and for Christmas, going home, and yet we were told their homes were bombed and blown out of existence. Nobody here objects to other people from anywhere in the world coming here to work, provided they have the proper visas and whatever they need to do that. But what they are objecting to, what the people are objecting to, is that people being placed in hotels, paid full social welfare and all the benefits, and have a good time inside in our hotels. How can he explain that, Taoiseach? That because that's what's happening, and at the same time you're hurting our tourism industry in Killarney and Kerry.
Taoiseach, please.
I'm not sure where to start there, but well, firstly, just in relation to housing supply in Kerry, I think you were with the Minister for Housing at the opening of a new housing estate in Castle Island very recently, and I think that's one of many examples of real progress being made in relation to housing supply, and I thank you for turning up to report that progress to your constituents in Kerry. It's important you do that. Second point I'd make, just in relation to the importance of the hospitality sector and immigrants. I've been to Kerry many times, beautiful county, and I certainly know, as I've been in many of the hospitality facilities, how reliant many of them are on migrants to help staff the tourism and hospitality sector in County Kerry. And I'm sure in your next comment you'd like to acknowledge the very positive contribution of the many migrant workers who work in hotels, in cafes, in bars, in souvenir shops, and all of the other wonderful facilities that you've mentioned in the Kingdom, because I think it would be important to do that too. I'm sure you'd also want to acknowledge on the record of this House that there are a number of hotels in Kerry that had been used for Ukrainian accommodation that are no longer being used, including the Dingle Harbour Lodge and the Hotel Killarney, and I'm sure you'd welcome that fact as well, because what we're actually seeing here is a conscious effort to try and work with communities, recognising the importance of the tourism sector, recognising the importance of the hospitality sector, to provide facilities back into that use as the situation allows. Look, I know we face a very difficult challenge when it comes to migration. I really do, and we're not alone in that. And I, as Taoiseach, intend to take charge of this situation and support ministers right across the government, because it is a whole of government issue. It's not reliant on any one department, it's reliant on every department looking at what they can do to support the situation. Support a humanitarian situation, support people in need, support in a compassionate way that this country always wants to support, but also to make sure that there is a rules-based system, that there is common sense, that our systems are efficient and effective. Because Irish people, I think, are two things. I think they're compassionate, and I think they're full of common sense. And I think they want to see a migration policy that does both of those things. So in the 4 weeks that I've been Taoiseach, we took action in relation to Main Street. We will act in relation to Grand Canal Dock. And very shortly, I want people to know this, that we have listened to some of the concerns. We've listened to the concerns that Irish people, good, decent people across this country, are raising, the questions that they're asking. Myself and ministers will respond, because we do need a much broader response to migration than just having a conversation about accommodation. Because if we solely have a conversation about accommodation, no matter how much accommodation we provide, accommodation will fill. We have to have a conversation about migration policy in the round. And I look forward to a number of proposals coming forward from ministers and from government in relation to that in the coming days. So what I say to you, Deputy Healy-Rae, is we will continue to work with communities in your county and communities across Ireland. We will continue to try and reduce the reliance on the private sector, because we don't want to be in the business of having to rely on facilities badly needed in towns and villages. We want to move away from that approach, away from the emergency and towards a sustained model. And they're very much the proposals that Minister O'Gorman got approval for in terms of his new accommodation framework at Cabinet only a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Taoiseach, but it's very clear to me two things. You're after giving me a lot of waffle. But the other thing is that you're not in touch with reality and what's happening in Kerry and Killarney. 36% of our bed nights are still taken up by refugees and asylum seekers. That is a fact. Many of our restaurants and cafes and so forth have closed. There is a problem there. And you see, we have to be honest with the people that are paying our taxes. They're paying 44% tax, and they're paying 52% tax, and 4.5% USC charges up on top of that. And this is what's happening. You're hurting the people. And you have lost control, because we have the Minister for Justice, who's beside you here today, on the one hand saying that she'll send migrants back to the UK. Who have we got to round them up? The Garda Immigration Bureau is not properly resourced. You're not able to follow him up. And he'll have to take action now, because clearly you've lost control with places like Killarney and Kerry. And we see what's happening here in Dublin in the television. We can see enough of that. You've lost control completely. And you have to come down to Kerry to see it. And I'm very sure that your local election candidates are getting it in the neck in Kerry, because I'm being told about it, and they know who's responsible for it. You levy them down.
Well, I will indeed visit Kerry. I regularly visit Kerry, and I look forward to doing that again. But we thank you so much. But we do have to acknowledge this, that policy changes have taken place in this country in relation to Ukraine, and we have seen Ukrainian numbers not just decrease, but decrease dramatically. And you can see that the figures.
Let the Taoiseach answer.
And I think you really should, cats, dogs, jeeps. Can we just rise to a higher level here, if you don't mind? Because we're dealing with a very serious situation, and what people in this country want to know is we're getting to grips with it. They want to know that we're using the various policy levers at our disposal to try and make progress. And what I say to them is, when we look at the Ukrainian situation, they can see that now in your own county, 2 hotels that were being used to house Ukrainians, now back, not using that, available for tourism, available for hospitality, available for all that you talked about. That is progress. That is progress. And we will continue to look at a range. You mentioned the Minister for Justice. Look at the actual decisions the Minister for Justice has taken around faster processing times. It's not a question of rounding people up. It's a question of providing people with clarity when they come to a country. Do you have a right to be here? You don't. If you have a right to be here, you integrate them, you welcome them. If you don't have a right to be here, you ensure they leave. That's the policy the government will pursue.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Michael McNamara, please.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, I wish to bring to your attention a worrying trend that has come to my attention and give one example of it. Taoiseach, it concerns a young man from the Indian subcontinent who travelled to the United Kingdom on a valid student visa issued by the UK government. That visa allows him to work for 10 hours a week only. He obviously hoped to work for far more, and he went to an agency in the United Kingdom who told him that they could get him full employment permission in Ireland and arrange travel and a work permit. They took £1,500 sterling from him and retained his passport so that he would pay an additional £1,000 when he started work. They arranged his travel to Liverpool, and from there a ferry to Belfast, from where he travelled down to Dublin. He was given the air code and the postal address of his employer, and he turned up there and it was the IPO office in Dublin. He obviously didn't know that he was being sent to the IPO office. He was one of 5 travelling in a similar way, organised by the same agents on the same day, and he knows of 30 more people sent to Ireland by that agency in the same way. He's now in Ireland. He's trying to get out of the asylum system and return back to the United Kingdom. He doesn't have his passport. Now, it's very clear that vulnerable people in a precarious position are being horribly exploited by bad actors. But Taoiseach, it's equally clear that our state is being exploited by those bad actors. And while the Punch and Judy show that your government is engaging in with the UK authorities is all well and good, I want to know, Taoiseach, what you can do and what hope there is of international cooperation to resolve this. Because if I know anything of the underworld in which these agents, these people traffickers, let's call them what they are, operate, is that if there's one agency doing it in London, there are many doing it in London. Taoiseach, you often talk of a rules-based system. Last week, the judgment of the 22nd of March came to light, and we were told it came to light that none of the rules around the sex offenders register were applied. The Department of Justice were informed by UK authorities of a sex offender and effectively did nothing until the matter was come to trial, or was about to come to trial. There are rules, we accept that, but the rules are simply not being applied. The Department of Justice is the lead agency for the security of this state and for public safety, but it seems unable to apply its own rules. So we can talk about a rules-based system all we want. If those rules are not being applied, they are essentially irrelevant. And the public at large, not just in this state, but unfortunately bad actors in other states, are cottoning on to that. We have a problem, Taoiseach.
Well, I thank Deputy McNamara for raising 2 important matters and giving me an opportunity to respond. In relation to the first one, it is a very serious matter, and I mean the government's response to this is to pass the human trafficking bill. Of course, not knowing the specifics of the individual case you raised, but taking it as an example of a broader issue. We did see the human trafficking bill, I believe, passed in the Dáil in recent days, and now moving forward into the Seanad. And as you'll know, as someone who would have participated here, this will put a revised national referral mechanism on a statutory footing, making it easier for victims of trafficking to come forward, to be identified, to access supports. And I think very much showing how serious this country on a legislative basis wants to take the issue of human trafficking, because the issue you highlight is indeed extremely important. We did see some progress in relation to Ireland's rating of the Trafficking in Persons report. Nothing to write home about. We have a lot of work to do in relation to this situation, but we did see in 2022 some positive progress made in relation to that. So I think between the legislation Minister McEntee is bringing forward and that will now go through the Seanad, and also the human trafficking strategy, I do want you to know, and I want that individual that you mentioned to know, and I want anybody seeking to exploit Ireland to know, this is an issue we will take and do take extraordinarily seriously. There is also very significant collaboration between An Garda Síochána and Europol, Interpol, and of course police forces in the United Kingdom as well. If there's any more specifics you want to give me in relation to that case, I'd be happy to pursue that as well. But we have seen some examples of convictions that I think show signs of progress too. In relation to the second part of your question, if you wish, and I've noted your comments, and I've read some of your questions in relation to this in public media in recent days, and I accept your bona fides in raising an issue that is important and that the Minister wants answers on as well, and has indeed sought answers. I do just need to slightly push back on the assertion in relation to the Department of Justice, because I'm informed that what we do know is that the details of an individual's criminal record was transmitted from the International Protection Office of the Department to An Garda Síochána at the time of its original receipt from the UK authorities. But I'm happy to allow the review do its business. I think it's quite appropriate that the Minister wants to ensure that the loop is closed in relation to this, because we do actually have a strong legislative basis. It's very clear that anyone who comes to Ireland who has been convicted of a sex offence abroad must register. And I should also say, and be cautious in what I say, Count Corda, because there could indeed be criminal proceedings here indeed, potentially, in relation to any hypothetical case, because the law of the land is very clear in relation to the obligation on any individual who is convicted of a sex offence to register, and there are indeed criminal sanctions should you choose not to do it. So what the Minister is seeking, and I fully support her in relation to this, is clarity on this case and indeed any other cases like this. I know you put some questions into her today, and I know the Minister will respond to you in relation to that. But I am satisfied this matter is being taken seriously. I am satisfied that we do have a firm rules-based system. I think we always have to keep on striving to do better. I think we all share that view right across government. Rules are in place, rules need to be enforced, rules need to seem to be enforced. Every person who enters this state does go through the SIS check. The SIS check is a centralised secure database used by European countries for maintaining information, what they call alerts, and indeed it was that alert system that would have identified this issue.
Yeah, thanks, Taoiseach. I transmitted those questions this morning, having previously transmitted them on yesterday morning, not Monday, it was a bank holiday, and I'm awaiting a response. I'm too satisfied that we have rules, and we have lots of rules and lots of legislation, and even more and more legislation all the time. But I'm not happy that they're being applied, because they're not. This is an instance where they weren't. Now, when it was raised in the public media last week, we were told there was a review. But the judgment was handed down. It's not me raising a concern. The High Court said it cannot be overlooked that information relating to the conviction was in the possession of the Minister's agents since October 2021 without steps being taken. I am troubled that this fact has not come to light sooner, given the purpose of maintaining a sex offenders register as a safety and control measure. So that judgment was handed down, was delivered to the Minister on the 22nd of March. When was that review requested? When did that review commence? Who was appointed to carry out that review? Can we see the terms of reference of that review? Or was that review something that was just rustled up? I hope it wasn't. Was it just rustled up last week in response to press queries?
You,
because that would be entirely unacceptable.
Thank you. Taoiseach?
So we do have rules. Rules are enforced. Rules need to be seen to be enforced. And on occasions where there's any questions in relation to that, it's important that we can quickly move to clarify that situation. There was a judgment given. I generally know, having been a minister in departments, when judgments come in, they're generally considered, advice taken, next steps and the likes. My understanding is the review was sought by the Minister last week. The Minister will respond.
Last week after it appeared in the media.
The Minister will respond to your
2 months after the judgment.
Deputy McNamara.
Deputy, please. Let the Taoiseach answer without interruption.
You were late turning up for your question. Now you're shouting me down. Can you just give me a little moment here? Because these are serious matters. Thanks, Deputy. I was here to answer your question. Thanks. Thank you very much. So, I mean, when the High Court makes comments, government departments take High Court comments very seriously. Government departments then appraise what action needs to be taken, advise the Minister, and the Minister has then made the decision, quite rightly, to seek a review into this matter. She wants that review to provide clarity in relation to this specific case. And I think that's important, because even some of the information you said, and said in good faith, I don't believe is accurate, because I do believe that information was transmitted from the IPO to the Guard. So the review in relation to the case is important, but also I think your secondary point is one we would share.
Thank you,
a review in relation to learning and making sure that this hasn't happened in any other cases is also important.
Thank you. That concludes Leaders' questions, and it enables us to move to